Imagine a world without power saws, laser levels, or electric drills. Yet across medieval Europe, sturdy bridges spanned rivers, wooden halls towered over towns, and timber-framed castles stood tall against the centuries. How did carpenters, armed only with axes, ropes, and chisels, achieve such feats of endurance and elegance? The answer lies not in brute strength alone, but in a treasury of tricks, quiet craftsmanship, and secrets passed down through generations, turning raw timber into marvels that still inspire awe today. In medieval society, carpenters occupied a place both humble and indispensable. They were not nobles, priests, or warriors, yet their work shaped the very skeleton of daily life. Every home, from peasant cottages to merchant houses, relied on their craft. Farmers turned to them for sturdy plows and wagons. Townsmen sought them for market stalls, doors, and furniture, and the church depended on them for wooden scaffolding and bell towers that reached toward heaven. Carpenters were builders of both the ordinary and the sacred. Unlike masons who carved permanence in stone, carpenters worked with a living material that bent, cracked, and breathed with the seasons. This required deep knowledge of wood, how to cut it, how to join it, and how to let it age without breaking apart. A carpenter's reputation rested not only on his strength, but on his wisdom, for each beam carried the weight of trust. Communities often gathered around the rhythmic sound of axes and hammers, for carpenters worked in public spaces as much as in private ones. Their labor was loud, visible, and filled with the scent of resin and sawdust. When a church spire rose in a village, it was the carpenter's scaffolding that held each stone in place. When a bridge crossed a river, it was the carpenter's design that ensured it would stand through floods. In this way, carpenters were not only artisans, but also silent guardians of medieval life. Without them, villages would have had no roofs, no wheels, no bridges. Their presence, though rarely celebrated in chronicles, was carved into the survival of every community. The medieval carpenter's toolbox may seem primitive by modern standards, yet it was remarkably effective in skilled hands. The axe was their most versatile instrument. It could fell trees, rough out beams, and even shape joints. Hand saws, often made of iron with wooden handles, sliced planks from logs with patient strokes. Chisels, sharpened by textual stone and hammered with wooden mallets, carved fine details and precise mortises. Measuring was done with the simplest of tools. A length of linen or leather cord became a makeshift tape, while straight edges of wood substituted for rulers. Compasses of wood and iron allowed carpenters to trace circles and arcs crucial for arches and curved beams. And when accuracy mattered most, the plumb line, a weight dangling on a string, ensured that walls stood straight and columns rose true. What these tools lacked in complexity, they compensated for in endurance. Crafted by local smiths, they were heavy, durable, and meant to last for years. A carpenter might own only a handful of implements, but each one was trusted like a companion. The axe grew familiar in his grip, the chisel carried the memory of countless blows, and the saw bore the scent of every timber it cut. With no machines to accelerate the work, progress was slow but steady. Every board was smoothed by hand, every joint carved by patient effort. This intimacy with the material gave carpenters a sense of mastery modern builders rarely achieve. They knew their wood as one knows a friend through touch, sound, and years of shared labor. Medieval carpenters relied on ingenious tricks to measure with accuracy long before the invention of modern rulers or levels. A simple rope became one of their most trusted tools. By tying knots at fixed intervals, they created a portable measuring line that could span beams or mark out building foundations. This method, though simple, allowed for remarkable consistency across large projects. For precision in angles, carpenters turned to wooden compasses. These were not the navigational compasses of sailors, but hinged tools that could be widened or closed to trace arcs and reproduce exact distances. With them, builders could replicate symmetrical curves for arches or ensure that timber joints fit snugly. The The plumb bob was another essential trick, a small weight hung from a string. Gravity did the work, pulling the line perfectly vertical, allowing carpenters to align posts and walls without guesswork. Even today, this ancient tool remains virtually unchanged. Chalk and charcoal provided another subtle method. By snapping a chalked cord against wood, carpenters left a clean, straight guideline for cutting. The crisp mark ensured that every saw stroke followed the intended path, reducing waste and mistakes. These tricks demonstrate a blend of resourcefulness and deep respect for natural forces. Instead of fighting gravity, carpenters used it. Instead of inventing complex devices, they transformed simple ropes and weights into instruments of precision. Their mastery lay not in having many tools, but in knowing how to stretch the potential of the few they possessed. Perhaps the greatest secret of medieval carpentry was the art of joinery. Without nails or screws, carpenters created frames that endured centuries. The technique of mortise and tenon, carving up protruding tongue on one beam to fit snugly into a hollow slot on another, was the cornerstone of their craft. When hammered together, the joint became stronger than the wood itself. To secure these joints, wooden pegs were driven through holes, locking the pieces in place. This not only held them tight, but also allowed the structure to expand and contract with the seasons without splitting apart. Metal nails, when available, were expensive and prone to rust. Wooden joints, on the other hand, were both practical and enduring. Carpenters also mastered dovetail joints, recognizable for their interlocking wedge shapes. These were used in chests, doors, and furniture, where strength and beauty combined. Each joint required careful chiseling, often by lamplight in workshops filled with shavings and the scent of resin. The elegance of these methods lay in their invisibility. A passerby might admire the soaring beams of a hall without ever noticing the hidden craftsmanship that bound them. Yet within those silent joints lay the true genius of the carpenter, the ability to turn separate pieces of wood into a unified whole. In a world before steel beams and industrial fasteners, joinery was both science and poetry, an art that bound communities together as firmly as it bound their houses. A carpenter's wisdom was revealed not only in his skill with tools, but in his choice of wood. Medieval builders understood that each tree carried its own personality, and the survival of a structure depended on matching the right timber to the right task. Oak was the monarch of woods. Dense, heavy, and resistant to decay, it served as the backbone of bridges, beams, and castle gates. Its slow growth gave it strength, and carpenters knew that an oak beam could hold the weight of centuries. For lighter frames and curved designs, they turned to ash, a wood prized for its flexibility and resilience. Ash bent without breaking, making it ideal for tool handles, wagon wheels, and arches. Pine and fir, by contrast, were chosen for roofing and upper structures. Their lighter weight eased the burden on foundations, and their straight grains made them easy to saw into planks. For delicate carvings or interior fittings, softer woods like alder or poplar offered smoother finishes. Carpenters also paid attention to the season of felling. Trees cut in winter, when sap retreated, were less likely to warp or split. Logs might be left to season in the open air, stacked carefully to dry, sometimes for years before they were used. In this deep knowledge of nature, carpenters became guardians of balance, selecting, cutting, and shaping timber so that the living strength of the forest became the enduring skeleton of human dwellings. Harvesting wood was only the first challenge. Moving massive logs to building sites demanded equal ingenuity. Without trucks or cranes, medieval carpenters relied on a blend of muscle, animals, and clever techniques. One common trick was the use of rollers. Thick branches laid beneath a log turned the forest floor into a primitive conveyor belt. With oxen pulling ropes and men guiding the way, even the heaviest oak could inch forward steadily. On uneven ground, sledges, flat wooden platforms, helped drag timber more easily, especially in snowy or muddy conditions. Rivers provided the most efficient highways. Carpenters often floated logs downstream, binding them into rafts to prevent them from drifting apart. The current carried them toward the towns and villages, sometimes traveling for days. This method saved immense labor, though it required careful planning to avoid jams and losses. At construction sites, ramps and levers multiplied human strength. Workers used inclined planes to roll beams upward, while long poles acted as levers to pry them into place. Pulleys, fashioned from wooden wheels, strung with rope, enabled men to lift loads far beyond their natural capacity. Every stage of transport was a communal effort. Villagers lent their hands, animals were harnessed, and waterways became extensions of trade routes. Carpenters did not work in isolation. Their craft depended on cooperation with the land, the animals, and the people around them. This choreography of movement, rolling, sliding, floating, lifting, was as crucial as the cutting itself. Without these transport tricks, no cathedral, hall, or bridge could ever have risen from the forest floor. When medieval carpenters turned their skills to monumental projects, their ingenuity became most visible. Cathedrals, castles, and bridges demanded not only skill with wood, but also the ability to coordinate vast teams and complex structures. One of their most impressive feats was scaffolding. Before a stone tower or church spire could rise, carpenters erected vast wooden frameworks, lattices of beams tied together with rope and wooden pegs. These temporary skeletons allowed masons to climb, place stones, and carve details high above the ground. Though dismantled after construction, scaffolding itself required mastery, for if it failed, so would the entire project. Carpenters also devised lifting machines. Wooden wheels turned by men walking inside like giant hamsters worked as treadwheel cranes. With pulleys and ropes, these cranes lifted stones and beams weighing tons, placing them with surprising precision. Every cathedral in Europe bore the invisible imprint of carpenters who designed and built these devices. Bridges, too, revealed their craft. By driving timber piles into riverbeds and locking them with braces, carpenters created supports strong enough to withstand currents. Some medieval timber bridges lasted for centuries, becoming lifelines of trade and travel. In castles, carpenters built drawbridges, gates, and hoardings, wooden galleries that jutted from walls to defend against attackers. Their designs blended strength with adaptability, ensuring that even in times of war, wood served as both shield and weapon. Through these works, carpenters proved that wood, though less permanent than stone, could reach the same heights of ambition. Their craft was the silent partner of medieval grandeur. Beyond the visible techniques, carpenters guarded a trove of quiet tricks that made their work endure. Some were simple aids, others subtle secrets passed down within workshops. Marking wood, for example, was an art. A cord dipped in powdered charcoal or chalk, snapped against timber, left a perfectly straight line, an essential guide for saws and axes. Unlike ink, the mark would not blur or wash away in damp conditions. To ease cutting, carpenters sometimes rubbed their saws with beeswax or animal fat. This reduced friction, kept blades from sticking, and made long hours of sawing less punishing. In regions where resinous woods clogged tools, this trick saved both time and energy. Wood itself needed taming. Freshly cut logs were prone to warping, twisting, or cracking as they dried. To counter this, carpenters soaked planks in water or buried them in damp soil, slowing the drying process and making the grain more stable. Some even seasoned timber by leaving it in rivers, letting the current leach out sap before use. They also relied on their senses. Knocking on a beam revealed its hidden faults. A hollow sound warned of rot or weakness.
Running fingers along the grain told them how it would split under the chisel. Knowledge was not written in books, but carried in the carpenter's ear, eye, and hand. These little-known tricks transformed rough lumber into lasting works. Though small in themselves, they multiplied the carpenter's power, allowing medieval buildings to defy weather, time, and decay. It was in these quiet gestures that their genius most often hid. The path to becoming a carpenter in the Middle Ages was long and demanding, woven into the fabric of guild traditions. Young boys often began as apprentices, sometimes as early as the age of 12. Their first tasks were menial, carrying timber, sharpening new tools, sweeping workshops. But these chores were more than labor. They were silent lessons in discipline and observation. Apprentices lived under the authority of a master carpenter, who provided not only training but also food and shelter. For 7 years or more, the apprentice absorbed knowledge through watching and imitating. He learned how to hold an axe correctly, how to read the grain of wood, and how to repair tools when they dulled. Every small task prepared him for greater responsibilities. After years of service, a promising apprentice could become a journeyman. This stage allowed him to travel from town to town, seeking work and experience. Journeymen carried a small chest of tools and earned wages, but their real reward was exposure to new techniques and different styles of construction. Only a few, after producing a masterpiece judged by their peers, rose to the higher rank of master carpenter. These men gained the right to open their own workshops, take apprentices, and join guild councils. The guild system ensured that carpentry remained both a craft and a tradition, carefully guarded against untrained outsiders. Thus, the knowledge of carpenters was passed not through books, but through calloused hands and watchful eyes. It was a legacy of sweat, patience, and loyalty. The legacy of medieval carpenters still stands before us today, silent but enduring. In Normandy, half-timbered houses with crisscrossing beams lean slightly with age, but remain habitable after 6 centuries. In England, the great timber roofs of churches like Westminster Hall soar above visitors, their massive oak trusses unbowed by time.